This is American First Patriot Podcast. Defending freedom and liberty is our motto. I'm your host, Chauncey Brown. Welcome to the show. Today, we have U.S. congressional candidate Gregg Mele running for Congress out of New Jersey, this district. He is an attorney. He's an extremely well-educated man, and we're excited to hear his take on our U.S. Constitution and how Congress has abused it or has neglected to use it effectively to administer government to represent all the people. Let me introduce and bring into the studio Gregg Mele. How are you, sir?
All right. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Gregg. I'm doing very well. You're probably one of the most educated individuals running, probably in the history of Congress, probably. You have about 8 degrees. Do you have a PhD yet?
No, mine is a JD. That's the one doctoral, but 3 masters otherwise.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Gregg,
enough certainly to get through the day, I hope.
Oh, without question, you are a walking library in and of itself. Talk a little bit about. I'm sorry, Gregg.
I said you're too kind.
Yeah, there's a little delay when we speak, so I want to apologize for that.
Okay.
Gregg, you're running in New Jersey. You're a lawyer. You know that you're well educated. I'd like to talk about, and you're running for Congress. I know you're an American First guy. You know, you believe in the Constitution, you believe in limited government. With your educational background, let's talk about your perception, educationally and as a congressional candidate, your perception of Congress and how you have seen them misappropriate, or misinterpret the Constitution, and share those experiences with us.
Well, I mean, one of the most important provisions in the Constitution, I would say probably many agree, is the 10th Amendment. That if it doesn't have it in the Constitution, it's not for the federal government to deal with. It's really outside of their jurisdictional bounds. And so we talk about in history class and what have you, the enumerated powers. The way that that's been expanded over time since the beginning of the country is just mind-boggling. It's a very loose and liberal interpretation that led to, I mean, in some cases, some clarifications, but in other cases, certainly involvement that's really abusive by the federal government in terms of, getting into people's private lives or things like that, and regulating a lot of things that really they have no business doing that with.
How have some of the regulations that have been imposed on Congress impacted New Jersey?
I mean, one big problem in general is the taxation and to pay for the expensiveness of government. I think we've had the purse strings in Congress used to again build up a large government in terms of staff, in terms of again the invasiveness. So we've had the problem with the impact of that being really on the other side of it, all the funds that people earn that they're not able to keep, and impacting their freedom, their ability to strive for the American dream. All those things have been curtailed because there's just so much spending, and a lot of it wasteful spending, so that government positions can be can be created and basically be in a situation where it's next to impossible to be fired from a government position. And really, there's so much disconnect between different areas of the government, too, that people are duplicating work. They're not talking to each other to be more efficient in between departments. It's a systemic problem that runs through many areas of the government. And because they keep pulling all the money in through the taxation, the lack of efficiency of the government agencies has no check on them. It doesn't stop them from being inefficient and continuing to cost us more and more, to the point that it's very hard to survive for more and more people. And New Jersey is a big example of that. I mean, we have the same problems at the state level, too. So we really pay a whole lot for all the services that are supposedly provided, but they're not provided very well or very efficiently, certainly.
And there's many cases where there's a lot of duplicity in services and overlapping of services. But like you said, the big expanded government for political patronage jobs, and bigger government lends more itself to corruption, regulation, mandates, overreach, invasiveness. Things that I know that you and I are against. That is not the role of government. And we have seen the left, if you will, really, especially with the Obama administration and the FBI, and even looking at during the Trump administration, how government officials have weaponized government against political opponents, whether it be candidates or whether it be the Tea Party movement, the IRS. Now they use these government agencies against the people for their own political motive, and that's definitely a clear case of where an abuse of power is present. And yes, we do need to elect more constitutional conservatives, or people like yourself who are educated and understand the purpose of the Constitution and the limitation that is placed on government. That we can hopefully, with 2022 and 2024, bring in the reins of government a little tighter, if you will, because out of control spending on any political side is not good for the health of the country.
Yep. And we see it now also with the conflict with Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's been the center of some real political power plays, I guess, over the last few years. But the worst thing in the world that President Biden could have done was to say that there's such a thing as a minor and therefore acceptable incursion. He said that in the beginning, and if that isn't a green light to hit the gas pedal to the floor for Putin to go in, I don't know what is. But that was because then he could have a distraction from his domestic issues with how he's killing the economy over here with inflation and cutting off the gas and energy independence too abruptly, and also create a mess that then he can try to come in at the last minute and try to claim victory for cleaning up what he created. So there's abuse of that power, and certainly, thank goodness we don't have another Afghanistan so far, at least, where we're actually putting American soldiers into Ukraine, and I suppose that's so politically distasteful that probably won't happen this time around, at least. Thank goodness. But you're stuck with all this expense of sending over the weaponry there, in large part because Biden opened the door. He showed that his weakness, and he showed that he was willing to appease instead of use the peace through strength strategy that was been successful in the past. And again, Putin took advantage of that. And the next thing on the list, if things go at least in a favorable way for it, I think China will finally move on Taiwan, thinking that the U.S. is just not able to deal with the reality of the situation they've created now with these conflicts. And on the other side of it, it's spending that didn't have to happen. if we had more strength in the Oval Office.
I still am perplexed, and maybe you can help us dissect this. I still cannot comprehend the sending of $14 billion to Ukraine. Can you help us dissect that, take that apart at all?
Well, there certainly is a humanitarian crisis in a few areas there now, and unfortunately, once the mess is there, it is hard to just stay back and not be involved in it. And this is the problem, though, is that part of the Democrat plan is always seems to be to destroy American independence and really throw away all kinds of money by creating situations where they can justify it and then justify higher taxation. In the end, the Democrats want to increase the wealth gap exponentially every day. It happens a lot in New Jersey too. When we had an estate tax before, and then that was replaced with a gas tax that disproportionately affects the poor, and it was one of the great shifts in the wealth gap to be expanded that we've ever seen. And they have no problem with that because all the Democrats are elitists and they just enjoy their position in the world, and they don't worry one bit about who they leave behind, which is many of us. So in terms of sending the money over there, it's hard to argue, okay, the Ukrainian people are suffering, however we got here, and now to leave them to starve or whatever else, it's not humane. And we're kind of sucked into the situation that way in a crisis mode instead of handling it better in the beginning like it should have been.
Agreed. We still have people trapped in Afghanistan. That's another.
Yeah.
He's been a disaster on every front. Still stranded citizens, reporters, stuck there. And you mentioned the oil. Well, we were energy independent, and then the strike with them in 1 week, we become energy dependent. And he's begging the Middle East for oil. He said no. It is really beyond comprehension how a person has been in office for 50 years and operates in this mode. Go ahead, Craig. I know you want to chip in.
I think that was one of the clearest examples of how the Democrats in particular are so hell-bent on just leaving everyone else behind. And they really don't care about anybody. They try to say they are for the little guy. It's clearly the Republican Party, with its flaws also, but they are definitely the party of the working man at this point. And it's really a crying shame that we get someone like Biden with the Afghanistan situation you mentioned. The Taliban had the deadline there, and then Biden says, "Can we get an extension to get all